The chamber pulsed with a faint golden light, its arched ceiling carved from a single slab of crystalline ore that shimmered as if alive. Alien figures filled the room, an uneasy tapestry of species, their forms grotesque and elegant, fragile and imposing. Each representative sat in weighted silence, their colors and textures shifting in time with their whispered apprehensions. The air was thick with a sharp tang of ionized particles, a byproduct of the holographic display hovering at the chamber's center. A planet, once a beacon of life, now spun on its axis as ash, its once green continents reduced to gray wastelands. Jagged streaks of lightning forked across its surface as remnants of its atmosphere churned in slow agony. The hologram zoomed outward, showing the fracture lines spreading from that doomed world like ripples in a pond. Nearby star systems glowed faintly, vulnerable dominoes waiting to fall. Kavara Rin, the Coalition's youngest counselor, rose slowly, her movements deliberate. Her robes of bioluminescent silk dimmed as her skin, a soft lavender shade marbled with gold veins, deepened in hue, an unconscious betrayal of her turmoil. Her voice, soft yet unyielding, cut through the murmurs like the strike of a flint. "We are not merely losing a war, we are unraveling. The fractured are not enemies, they are entropy incarnate." The word entropy hung in the air, untranslatable to some species, but universally understood. Representatives murmured, some shifting in discomfort. A creature with transparent skin emitted a low hum, while a scaled delegate curled its claws against the seat, the sound like dry parchment being crushed. Kavara continued, her voice sharpening. 50 worlds. 50. Gone in one cycle. They do not negotiate, they do not relent, and they cannot be reasoned with. She gestured toward the hologram as it displayed a loop of destruction. The fractured, gleaming, insect-like constructs devoured everything in their path. Massive swarms dismantled cities, oceans, even atmospheres, reducing entire biospheres into raw material for replication. They moved like a fluid, an unthinking force of annihilation. "They adapt faster than our most advanced technologies can counter them," she said, her throat tightening with each word. "And every adaptation strengthens their next assault." A tall figure of crystalline shards stood, the motion emitting a brittle chime. Counselor Jal from the Harmony Worlds, a civilization famed for its defensive prowess, spoke, his voice fractured like glass under pressure. "Our strongest fleets fell within hours. Entire armadas reduced to wreckage. There is no weapon among us that can slow them, let alone defeat them." The chamber buzzed with despair, the air heavy with the scent of foreign pollens and metallic exhalations. Kavara clenched her fist behind her back. She knew she had only one chance to present her radical proposal. "There is one species," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "that could tip the scales." A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. Kavara raised her hand, activating a personal holographic device. A rotating sphere appeared, Earth, with its chaotic weather patterns and rich biomes. A collective gasp resonated as the display zoomed in, showing images of human history, sprawling metropolises, smoky battlefields, figures huddled in shelters under searing skies. "This world," she said, "is classified as a death world, a planet so hostile that life should not thrive, and yet they do." Her words struck like a gong vibrating through the room. Many delegates recoiled. Death worlds were legendary among the stars, planets of unrelenting storms, toxic atmospheres, and savage predators. Such places were catalogued, avoided, and sometimes quarantined. "They call themselves humans," Kavara continued, her voice rising. "Their civilizations rose amidst fire, famine, and disease. Their bodies heal from wounds that would kill us. Their minds are wired for survival through chaos. Elder Decor, a being whose body flickered with internal light like a storm trapped in glass, leaned forward. His voice was low and resonant, like thunder on the horizon. "We quarantined them for a reason. They are violent, unpredictable, and reckless." Kavara's gaze didn't waver. "Exactly. They have survived where logic dictated they should perish. That is what we need. Not precision, not protocol. Raw, unrelenting survival. Even if we agree, Decor rumbled, how do you suggest they overcome what we could not? Kavara's fingers danced across the holographic interface, bringing up footage of human improvisation. Soldiers creating barricades from wreckage, engineers repurposing tools under fire, medics stabilizing the critically injured with nothing but torn fabric and determination. They do not fight by our rules, she said. They improvise, adapt, turn the impossible into the inevitable. Counselor Jal emitted a sharp, crystalline tone. Their aggression might as easily destroy us as the fractured. Kavara didn't flinch. If we do nothing, we're already destroyed. The room plunged into silence, save for the distant hum of the chamber's atmosphere regulators. The delegates exchanged glances, their colors shifting subtly, a silent language of indecision. Finally, Elder Decor spoke again, his voice heavy with resignation. Bring them here. Kavara exhaled slowly, her skin brightening in relief. But even as murmurs of agreement spread, she felt the weight of what she had unleashed. On Earth, the skies over the Pacific shimmered with auroras as the Coalition envoy ship broke through the atmosphere. The sleek vessel, its hull reflective like liquid mercury, descended silently over a naval base bristling with human defenses. Alarms blared, jets roared into formation, their engines screaming against the alien ship's eerie stillness. Inside the command center, Commander Elias Wren stood amidst a sea of tension. The scent of burnt coffee and gun oil lingered in the room as officers barked updates. Visual contact confirmed, said an aide, her voice tight with nerves. The craft is holding steady at 5,000 feet. Elias rubbed a hand across his stubble-lined jaw. Send a hailing signal. Let's see if they came to talk or flatten us. A faint crackle filled the airwaves. Then a voice layered with harmonic undertones spoke in perfect English. Humans, we come in peace. The room froze. Elias leaned forward, his tone even but edged with authority. Identify yourself and state your purpose. A hologram materialized, showing Kavara Rin. Her lavender skin glowed faintly, her golden veins pulsing in sync with her voice. I am Counselor Kavara Rin of the Galactic Coalition. We seek your aid against an enemy that threatens all life. In return, we offer technology, knowledge, and alliance. The words hung heavy. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs, disbelief palpable. Elias met Kavara's steady gaze. You kept us quarantined for decades because you thought we were dangerous. Now you want us to save you? Kavara's expression didn't falter, but her voice softened. Yes, because now we understand that sometimes danger is necessary. Elias considered her words, his mind already racing through possibilities. He could see it, the precarious tightrope between desperation and opportunity. Humanity's first step into the stars, not as explorers, but as warriors. He turned to his staff. Alert global leadership, and someone find me a damn translator who can explain what fractured means. As the room erupted into motion, Elias looked back at the hologram. The unease in Kavara's glowing veins mirrored the storm brewing in his chest. All right, he muttered to himself. Let's see what kind of mess you've dragged us into. The room buzzed with subdued chaos as military officials and scientists swarmed around Commander Elias Wren. A low hum of voices mixed with the clatter of keyboards and the steady whir of holographic displays. The scent of ozone lingered, a faint trace left behind by the alien envoy's projection. The words, "Danger is necessary," still echoed in Elias's mind, a heavy mantra hanging over the tense atmosphere. He stepped away from the knot of officers, his boots tapping against the polished floor with deliberate force. The motion was calculated, a commander asserting focus in a room brimming with uncertainty. The hologram of Kavara Rin flickered faintly in the center of the room, her glowing veins pulsing with subtle agitation. Her alien elegance contrasted sharply with the utilitarian sharpness of the human war room, where gray metal walls and exposed cables seemed to absorb her light. Counselor Rin, Elias said, his voice steady but edged with scrutiny. Before we even consider your proposal, You're going to tell us exactly what we're up against." Kavara's expression didn't falter, but the faintest shimmer of unease passed across her lavender skin. "The fractured," she began, her melodic voice softening as if she were recounting a ghost story. "A swarm of biomechanical constructs born in the cold void between galaxies. They consume and replicate, dismantling entire ecosystems for raw material." The room fell silent except for the steady clicking of a stenographer logging every word. Kavara expanded the holographic display. A web of glowing lines spread across the galaxy like arteries pumping destruction, each endpoint pulsing with the crimson hue of eradicated systems. The imagery pressed into the room's collective consciousness, a visceral ache behind the eyes. Elias leaned closer, his gaze narrowing. "And you fought them?" Kavara inclined her head. "We've tried. They adapt to every weapon, every formation. They exploit the precision we pride ourselves on, dismantling us piece by piece." Her voice trembled slightly, but she caught herself, tightening her tone into something sharper. Elias caught the fleeting lapse, the telltale crack in her otherwise flawless demeanor. It wasn't just the fractured she feared. It was the Coalition's failure to adapt, their brittle confidence shattered by an enemy they couldn't comprehend. Elias turned to his senior strategist, Major Saito, a man with an intense stillness that belied his razor-sharp mind. Saito studied the projection with a deliberate patience, his dark eyes flicking between nodes on the glowing map. "They're a hive mind," Saito said finally. His voice was low, almost contemplative. "Decentralized but coordinated. They think faster than we do, anticipate faster than we react." Kevra nodded, her glowing veins pulsing slightly faster. "That is why we've come to you. Your kind does not think in patterns. You are—" "Messy," Elias interjected, his tone laced with irony. "Unpredictable. Dangerous." Kavara hesitated, her lips parting as though searching for a more diplomatic phrase. "Creative," she said finally. "It is your nature to improvise under pressure, to turn the illogical into opportunity." The faintest chuckle rippled from a corner of the room. Corporal Ryan, a young technician standing over a bank of displays, quickly stifled it under Elias's sharp glare. Still, Elias felt a bitter amusement rise in his chest. They weren't being called heroes. They were a species of cornered animals, adaptable because they'd had no choice. "All right," Elias said, straightening. "Let's talk strategy." Kavara's hologram expanded the display again, this time showing footage of a Coalition fleet engaging the fractured. The alien ships moved with elegant precision, formations tightening and shifting like a symphony. The fractured tore through them with a savage efficiency, their constructs shifting shape mid-battle to counter every maneuver. The sound accompanying the visuals was haunting, an unnatural keening that burrowed into the ears, tinged with metallic distortion. Elias's jaw tightened as he watched. "Beautiful," he muttered, "and completely useless." Kavara's head tilted, her expression unreadable. "What would you do differently, Commander?" Elias stepped forward, his silhouette cutting sharply into the hologram's light. "Stop trying to outthink them. You're feeding them exactly what they want. Predictable patterns. Fight chaos with chaos." Major Saito nodded, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Unconventional tactics. Guerrilla warfare. Hit them where they least expect it." Kavara's glowing veins flickered faintly. "You would abandon order entirely?" "No," Elias said, his voice darkening. "We'd weaponize disorder. There's a difference." Kavara stared at him, her alien features unreadable. "And do you believe your people can sustain such a war?" Elias turned to face her, his expression hardening. "Let's not pretend you have a better option." The silence that followed was a suffocating weight. Even the hum of the room's systems seemed to dull under the charged atmosphere. Kavara's gaze didn't waver, but her hesitation spoke volumes. She gestured faintly, and the hologram dimmed, leaving the humans in the stark fluorescence of their war room. "I will inform the Coalition that Earth is willing to discuss terms," Kavara said softly. "But this is not a negotiation, Commander. It is survival for all of us." As her hologram faded, the tension in the room broke like a taut wire snapping. Officers began murmuring among themselves, their voices overlapping in a chaotic hum. Saito approached Elias, his tone quiet, but insistent. "They're desperate," he said, "and desperate allies can be dangerous ones." Elias didn't reply immediately. His gaze lingered on the now dim projection of the fractured's destruction. The crimson glow seared into his memory. "Desperate allies are the only kind we get, Major," he said finally. "Let's make sure we're ready when they drag us into their mess." The alien data files arrived hours later, transported via encrypted quantum links that hummed faintly as the files materialized. The air in the strategy room grew heavier, with the scent of heated circuits as the data unfolded across massive holographic tables. Maps, tactical recordings, weapon schematics, all laid bare in intricate detail. "Christ," muttered Corporal Ryan, his face pale under the cold blue glow of the data stream. "It's like trying to read the mind of a god." Elias ignored the remark, his focus razor-sharp as he dissected the fractured's battle patterns. Each movement was terrifying in its precision, a cold logic that stripped away any semblance of hope. Yet, within the perfection, he saw cracks. Faint, almost imperceptible inconsistencies. "What are you looking for, sir?" Saito asked, his tone calm despite the weight pressing down on the room. Elias didn't answer immediately. His eyes locked onto a single skirmish recorded from the Coalition's fleet. A fractured swarm had pursued a damaged ship, its movements becoming erratic. For a fleeting moment, the swarm's coordination had faltered as if struggling to adjust to the ship's unpredictability. "There," Elias said finally, pointing. "They adapt, but they're not omniscient. Their hive mind has limits, probably bandwidth. We exploit that." Saito nodded slowly, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Overload the system." Elias's gaze hardened, drowned in chaos. The plan began to take shape in his mind, a war unlike any the galaxy had seen. It would be brutal, bloody, and desperate. And it would work. He glanced at the flickering maps, his mind already spinning with contingencies. "We're not just fighting for them," Elias muttered, his voice low. "We're fighting for the right to survive on our terms." The desert heat pressed down like a living thing, thick and unyielding, as Elias stood on the edge of the Coalition's temporary outpost on Earth. The alien base sprawled across the barren expanse, a gleaming lattice of silver and translucent structures, pulsing faintly like an organic heart. Engineers and soldiers, both human and alien, buzzed around the base, their efforts synchronized yet disjointed, a collision of two cultures still learning to trust one another. The air carried a faint hum of alien machinery, underscored by the sharp scent of scorched sand. Nearby, hybrid vehicles hummed with experimental energy cores, their engines emitting a pitch somewhere between a whistle and a growl. Elias's boots crunched against the coarse grit as he crossed the compound toward the training grounds, the horizon behind him bleeding into a molten orange sky. At the center of the grounds, a sparring session unfolded between two soldiers, a human and a feline-like alien with iridescent fur. The alien moved with fluid grace, its limbs a blur, while the human soldier dodged clumsily before countering with a quick, unpredictable feint. A circle of observers murmured, their voices a low tide of curiosity and skepticism. "They don't move like us," Major Saito muttered, appearing at Elias's side. His arms were crossed, his sharp eyes tracking the combatants with a predator's precision. "No, they don't," Elias replied, his tone flat. "But they're learning." The alien soldier lunged, its claws flashing only to be caught off guard by the human's unorthodox maneuver. A well-placed kick sent the alien stumbling, earning a ripple of muted approval from the onlookers. The human soldier extended a hand to help their opponent up, an awkward gesture that seemed to puzzle the alien. Elias turned to Saito. "What do you see?" Saito exhaled slowly. "Potential, but not enough cohesion. They're still thinking like separate species, not a single force." Elias nodded, his expression unreadable. "We don't have time for them to figure it out." A sharp whistle cut through the air, drawing their attention. Lieutenant Maya Aaron strode toward them, her expression as sharp as her movements. "Commander, the fractured outpost intel just came in. It's worse than expected." Elias didn't flinch, but a flicker of tension coiled in his chest. "How bad?" Erin handed him a data pad, her fingers brushing the edges of the screen. "Multiple nodes, reinforced structures, and adaptive countermeasures already in place. They've fortified the entire region." Elias scanned the display, the alien script translating into something legible, but no less daunting. The fractured had entrenched themselves like a cancer, their tendrils spreading across the planetary surface, consuming resources and choking the terrain into sterility. The footage of their constructs moved with eerie synchronicity, a dance of perfection that set his teeth on edge. "Perfect," he muttered, the word dripping with irony. Saito leaned over his shoulder, his brow furrowing. "We're walking into a death trap." "Not if we make it their trap," Elias replied, his tone cold. "Gather the team. Briefing in 10. The command center buzzed with activity as Elias stood before the assembled strike force. The room smelled of metal and ozone, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Faces, human and alien alike, turned toward him, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and determination. Kevra Rin stood at the edge of the room, her glowing veins pulsing faintly as she observed in silence. Elias spoke without preamble, his voice cutting through the ambient hum. "This is our first major engagement against the fractured. It won't be clean, and it won't be fair. But we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win." He gestured to the holographic map hovering in the air, its glowing topography revealing the fractured, sprawling outpost. Their structure relies on a network of nodes. Each one acts as a relay, coordinating their hive mind. We're not just hitting their resources, we're hitting their ability to think. A murmur spread through the crowd, quiet but charged. Kavara's gaze flickered toward him, her expression unreadable. "We'll divide into 3 teams, Elias continued, his tone crisp, each with a specific objective. Team Alpha disrupts their outer defenses. Team Bravo plants EMP charges on key nodes. Team Charlie extracts critical intel before regrouping." A young corporal raised her hand hesitantly. "And what if they adapt faster than we expect?" Elias's eyes narrowed, his voice hardening. "Then we adapt faster. Questions?" The room fell silent, the weight of the mission settling like a physical force. Kavara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the quiet. "This mission is more than a tactical strike. It is a test, not just for you, Commander Wren, but for humanity." Her words lingered, heavy with implication. Elias didn't respond, his focus already shifting to the battle ahead. The launch was a blur of motion and noise. Engines roared as hybrid ships lifted off the desert floor, their sleek designs a fusion of human and alien ingenuity. Inside the cramped hull, Elias felt the vibration of the engines resonate through his body, a relentless reminder of what lay ahead. The air was thick with sweat and anticipation, every breath carrying the faint tang of recycled oxygen. The strike force descended on the fractured outpost under the cover of darkness, the landscape below a jagged expanse of lifeless rock and glowing fissures. The ships touched down with precision, their engines hissing as they powered down. The teams disembarked in silence, their movements swift and deliberate. Elias led Team Alpha toward the outer defenses, his senses heightened to the point of pain. The air was thick with a metallic tang, and the faint hum of the fractured's constructs vibrated in his bones. The landscape around them pulsed faintly with an unnatural glow, the ground beneath their boots brittle and lifeless. "Keep it quiet," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the comms. "We don't need their attention until we're ready." The team moved like shadows, their hybrid gear muffling their steps. They reached the first node, a spire of blackened metal and pulsating energy, without incident. Elias gestured to a technician, who began planting the EMP charge with practiced precision. The quiet didn't last. A high-pitched keening split the air, a sound that seemed to claw at their ears. The fractured's constructs emerged from the darkness, their movements fluid and alien, their forms shifting as though sculpted from liquid steel. "Engage!" Elias barked, his voice slicing through the chaos. The battle that followed was pure chaos. The air filled with the sharp crack of energy weapons, and the guttural cries of combat. The constructs moved with inhuman speed, their limbs elongating and twisting to strike from impossible angles. But the humans fought back with a ferocity born of desperation, their movements unpredictable and wild. Elias dodged a strike from one of the constructs, its blade-like appendage slicing through the air inches from his face. He retaliated with a burst from his modified rifle, the weapon's pulse tearing through the construct's chest. It collapsed with a screech, its form disintegrating into shards. "We're clear!" the technician shouted, his voice ragged. Elias glanced at the charge, its timer ticking down steadily. "Move out! Next target!" The team pressed forward, their path lit by the eerie glow of the fractured's constructs. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the mission pressing down like an invisible hand. Yet amidst the chaos, Elias's mind was sharp, his focus unrelenting. As they approached the next node, Elias felt a faint tremor beneath his feet. The ground pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, a signal he couldn't yet decipher. His stomach twisted with unease, the sense that something larger, something far more dangerous, lay just beyond their reach. But there was no time to dwell. "Keep moving," he ordered, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "We're not done yet." And deep in the shadows, the fractured began to stir. The tremor beneath their boots had faded, but its echo lingered in Elias Wren's chest. The pulse of the fractured hive wasn't just a sound, it was a sensation, an unsettling rhythm that made his teeth itch. The terrain ahead shimmered with faint, pulsing veins of light that branched and forked through the cracked earth, a glowing circulatory system feeding some unseen heart. Each step forward felt like intruding on something alive, something coiled and waiting. Elias raised a fist, halting his team just before a ridge. The air here was different, charged, heavy, like breathing through static. A distant hum reached their ears, faint but rising in pitch, burrowing into their skulls with a persistence that made the silence between pulses unbearable. He motioned for Lieutenant Maya Aaron to bring up the reconnaissance drone. Maya knelt, her hands swift and deliberate as she launched the palm-sized device. It hovered noiselessly, its matte surface absorbing the ambient glow as it crested the ridge and began relaying images to their wrist displays. What they saw made even Elias's steady breath catch. Below, the fractured hive stretched outward like a nightmare made tangible. Towers of obsidian-like material jutted from the ground, their surfaces flowing and rippling like liquid trapped in time. Between them, shimmering threads of energy flickered, creating a web of connection. Swarms of fractured constructs moved in perfect synchronization, their forms twisting and reforming as if the machines themselves were still evolving. In the center of it all, a massive central spire loomed, its apex lost in the haze of its own radiance. "That," Maya whispered, her voice taut, "is a whole new level of nope." Elias crouched beside her, his jaw tightening as he studied the screen. "That spire's their command node," he said. "Take that out, and the whole system destabilizes." Saito's voice crackled softly through the comms. "Even if we get close, how do we breach something like that? It looks like it's shielded 6 ways to Sunday." Elias let the question hang for a moment, his mind racing. The fractured's movements, the pulsing light, even the hum in the air. It all connected. They weren't just looking at a machine. They were staring at a distributed intelligence, every piece working to reinforce the others. Attacking it head-on was suicide, but there was always a crack, even in the most perfect machine. "Team Bravo," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Status on those EMP charges?" Bravo's leader, Sergeant Ilyas Carden, responded immediately. "We've got 2 in place, 3rd one going live in 5 minutes. Interference is slowing us down. Feels like they know we're here." "They do," Elias muttered. He tapped his comm unit, switching to a broader channel. "All teams, listen up. We don't have the firepower to punch through that spire, but we don't need to. The fractured's hive mind is built on efficiency. Every node, every construct, every action. It's all about maintaining balance. Disrupt that balance, and the system collapses." He traced the network of energy lines on the holographic map projected from his wrist. "We're not going to destroy their node. We're going to make it destroy itself." Silence followed his words. broken only by the distant hum of the hive. Then Saito's voice cut through, calm and steady. "And how do we pull that off?" Elias leaned into the map, his finger tracing a path through the fractured's network. "The EMP charges will knock out their secondary nodes, forcing the central node to compensate. The increased load will create a feedback loop. But to trigger it, we'll need to overload the energy lines leading into the spire." Maya's brow furrowed as she studied the map. "That means hitting multiple points at once. We don't have enough people for that." "We don't need people," Elias said. "We need distractions." He turned to Corporal Ryan, who had been quietly monitoring their equipment. "Corporal, how many of those drone prototypes do we have left?" Ryan glanced at his pack. 6, but they're not built for combat." "They don't have to fight," Elias replied. "They just need to make a lot of noise. Rig them with decoys, thermal flares, EMP bursts, anything that'll draw the swarm away from us." Ryan nodded, his hands already moving to repurpose the drones. Elias turned back to the map, his voice hardening. "Saito, you'll lead Team Bravo to plant the last charge. Maya, you're with me. We're taking out those energy lines. Ryan, you stay here and keep the drones running interference. If this works, we'll force their system into a loop it can't escape. If it doesn't—" He let the sentence hang, unspoken but understood. Saito grunted. "Hope you've got a plan B." "This is plan B," Elias said grimly. Plan A was living to retirement. The team moved swiftly, their motions a practiced rhythm despite the tension in the air. The hum of the fractured hive grew louder as they descended into the heart of the network. The glow of the energy lines intensified, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted like living things. Every step felt like stepping into the jaws of a beast, each pulse of light a reminder of the intelligence lurking just out of sight. Elias's heart thudded in time with the hum as he and Maya reached the first energy line. The conduit pulsed with a blinding white light, its surface smooth and seamless. Maya knelt beside it, her tools clinking softly as she worked to attach the overload device they'd prepared. 3 minutes, she said, her voice tight. "Assuming I don't fry myself first." "You won't," Elias said, his eyes scanning the horizon. "But move faster." The first explosion came from the far ridge, a burst of light and sound that shook the ground beneath them. Ryan's drones were in action, their decoys drawing swarms of fractured constructs away from the team's position. The constructs moved like a tidal wave, their forms merging and splitting as they pursued the false signals. For a moment it almost looked like it was working. Almost. The second explosion followed, this one closer. Elias felt the tremor in his bones, the sound rattling through the air like thunder. The hum of the hive shifted, its rhythm faltering for the briefest moment before resuming, louder and faster. "They know," Maya said, her hands moving faster. "They're compensating." "That's the point," Elias replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Make them react. Make them overreach." Saito's voice crackled through the comms. "Last charge is in place, detonating in 30 seconds. "Wait for my signal," Elias said. He glanced at Maya. "Are we set?" "Almost," she muttered, her fingers flying over the device. "Just a done." The device hummed to life, its light merging with the conduit's glow. Elias tapped his comm. "Bravo, go." The EMP charges detonated in rapid succession, their pulses rippling through the hive like shock waves. The energy lines flickered and dimmed, their glow faltering as the fractured system scrambled to compensate. The hum of the hive grew erratic, its once perfect rhythm splintering into dissonance. Elias felt a flicker of hope as the central spire's glow intensified, its energy lines overloading. But the hope was short-lived. From the base of the spire, a new sound emerged, a low, resonant roar that vibrated through the air like a living thing. Maya's eyes widened. "What is that?" Elias stared at the spire, his stomach twisting as the glow shifted, darkening into a deep, pulsating red. The fractured weren't just compensating, they were adapting. "They're waking up," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and they're angry." Deep within the hive, the ground trembled as something massive began to stir. Elias tightened his grip on his weapon, his mind racing. "Fall back," he ordered. "We're not done, but we're out of time." The tremors beneath Elias's feet turned violent, shaking the ground like a pulse of rage. The spire loomed ahead, its glow a deep crimson now, pulsating in time with the deafening roar emanating from its base. The sound wasn't mechanical, it was something worse. It was intent, a message in frequencies too low to hear but too visceral to ignore. The fractured weren't just reacting, they were retaliating. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle, the weight of it grounding him as his mind calculated paths to survival. Around him, his team moved with frantic precision, their movements sharp but deliberate. Maya knelt by the conduit, her hands scrambling to adjust the overload device, the glow of her tools casting sharp shadows across her determined face. "Whatever you're doing, Aaron," Elias barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "Do it faster." Maya didn't look up, her voice tight with focus. "Faster gets us killed. Accurate gets us out." The ground beneath them cracked, a jagged fissure snaking toward the conduit like a predator closing in. Elias stepped between it and Maya, his boots grinding against the brittle earth. Above them, the sky churned with energy, flashes of unnatural light illuminating the chaos. He tapped his comm, switching to the broader channel. "Saito, what's your status?" Saito's reply came through jagged bursts of static, his tone clipped but alive. "We're pinned down, Commander. The drones are losing effectiveness, and the swarm's adapting faster than we can move." Elias exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The fractured constructs moved with a terrifying fluidity, their forms warping and fusing into larger shapes, each adaptation more grotesque and efficient than the last. The drones, once a brilliant distraction, now sparked uselessly as the constructs dismantled them mid-air. "Pull your team back toward the extraction point," Elias ordered. "We'll finish here." There was a pause, and when Saito spoke again, his voice was edged with reluctant acceptance. "Understood. Good hunting." Elias turned back to Maya, her face illuminated by the flickering conduit. "You've got 30 seconds, Aaron. After that, I'm carrying you out whether you like it or not." She shot him a quick glare, but didn't argue, her fingers working faster now, her breathing steady despite the chaos. The fissure behind her widened, a crackling wave of heat rolling out as if the ground itself were protesting their presence. Then the roar shifted. Elias froze, his instincts screaming. The spire's glow darkened further, its crimson hue turning to a black so deep it seemed to swallow the light around it. The constructs stopped moving for a moment, their forms quivering as if awaiting orders. Maya's voice broke through the stillness. "That's not good." Before Elias could respond, the spire erupted. A surge of energy shot skyward, splitting the atmosphere with a crack so loud it felt like it could split bones. The constructs surged forward, no longer a swarm, but a single massive wave of motion, their jagged forms cutting through the landscape like liquid metal given life. "Maya, now!" Elias roared, pulling her to her feet as the device locked into place, its core emitting a sharp, rising hum. "It's set!" she shouted, stumbling as Elias dragged her away from the conduit. "But the charge won't hold if—" A construct lunged from the fissure, its blade-like appendages slicing through the air with lethal precision. Elias raised his rifle, the pulse of its shot slamming into the construct's center, sending it sprawling backward into the crackling earth. "They're not waiting for us to leave," Maya gasped, her voice trembling as more constructs emerged, their movements erratic but purposeful. "They never do," Elias muttered, his jaw tightening. He tapped his comm. "Ryan, detonate the decoys." The horizon lit up as the remaining drones ignited, their explosive payloads ripping through the swarm's outer edges. The blast created a brief, chaotic lull, just enough for Elias and Maya to sprint toward the extraction point. Behind them, the spire began to pulse erratically, its glow faltering as the overload device sent shockwaves through its network. The constructs hesitated, their once perfect movements becoming staggered, their forms glitching like corrupted data. But Elias knew it wasn't over. As he and Maya reached the ridge, a deafening crack split the air, followed by a sound that made every muscle in Elias's body lock, a scream, deep and resonant, like metal tearing through flesh. It wasn't the constructs. It was the hive itself, the spire's intelligence lashing out in its death throes. Maya collapsed beside him, her chest heaving. "Tell me that's a good sign." Elias stared at the spire, its pulsing glow collapsing inward. The scream grew louder, reverberating through his chest, a primal sound of desperation and fury. "It's breaking," he said, though the words felt hollow. "But it's not going quietly." The spire began to twist, its form bending as though the very fabric of its existence was unraveling. The constructs stopped moving entirely, their forms quivering as the hive's control fractured. Then, with one final deafening roar, the spire imploded, its energy collapsing into a singularity that swallowed everything around it. The shockwave hit like a tidal wave, flattening the terrain and throwing Elias and Maya to the ground. The air turned white-hot, the taste of iron and ash thick on Elias's tongue as the force ripped through the ridge. He felt the ground beneath him shift, and for a brief, terrifying moment he thought it might swallow them whole. Then, silence. Elias pushed himself to his knees, his vision swimming as the dust settled. The spire was gone, its remains a scorched crater that still pulsed faintly with dying energy. The constructs lay inert, their forms scattered like broken toys across the battlefield. Maya coughed beside him, her voice hoarse. "Did we just—" "We did," Elias said, his voice flat. "But it wasn't a clean win." He tapped his comm, his voice cutting through the static. "Saito, report." The channel crackled before Saito's voice came through, strained but alive. "We're clear, Commander. Swarm's down, but it's messy out here. What the hell did you do?" "Reminded them why they don't mess with us," Elias replied, his voice dark with satisfaction. He turned to Maya, his gaze heavy. "Let's get the hell out of here." As they made their way back to the extraction point, the battlefield stretched out behind them like a graveyard, the broken constructs a testament to the chaos humanity had unleashed. The sky above, once churning with energy, was now eerily calm, the silence oppressive in its finality. Elias glanced at the horizon, his jaw tightening. The fractured hive was gone, but its scream still lingered in his mind, a reminder that this war wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could thrive in the face of the unimaginable, that they weren't just soldiers, they were survivors. As they boarded the extraction vessel, Kavara Wren's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander Wren, your efforts have given the galaxy a chance." Elias's grip on the railing tightened, his gaze steady. "We're not just giving it a chance, Counselor. We're making damn sure it remembers who answered the call." As the ship lifted off, the title etched itself into the unspoken history of the galaxy. Humanity hadn't just fought. They had answered the cries for heroes, and they had become them.